so that we can review those topics we've talked about, and then you can go back and practice them. Then that's what we'll do for the rest of the semester is we're going to continue on, the rest of the term, we're going to continue on just talking about these algebra topics, okay? There won't be an assessment, but that does not mean that they have no value, because these are skills that your year 9 class are going to expect you come into the class with them, right? So, even though there's not an assessment, take them seriously. You will still have homework for these, right? And this would be a great time for you to get in the habit of doing your homework when it's due. What a change, okay? So, I'm going to be watching that a little more closely now, right? So, because many of you are not doing your homework, or you're doing very little of it. Okay? So. Okay. All right. So, here we go. Let's talk a little bit about it. First of all, remember that we start in mathematics with arithmetic. Remember, arithmetic is just the 4 basic operations. Using numbers, right? Add, subtract, multiply. One more. Divide, good. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, and you have numbers. Well, you never have any more than that, operation-wise. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide, right? That stays the same. But in algebra, we introduce one more item that changes it from arithmetic to algebra. Who can remember what that one item is?
No.
Variables. Excellent. I'm so pleased. Thank you. All right. And remember, variables are simply represented by letters. Exactly. And all those letters stand for is some unknown number. But of course, it's a lot easier to write X than it is to write some unknown number every time. If you want to write some unknown number,
you should
go for it.
Sun.
Okay?
Some unknown number, sun.
There you go. So you can write something, but it just makes more sense. And you can use any variable, X, Y, or the most common. You'll also see lots of A's and B's. Many times C, because C we generally use but we usually have a something for C. What does C usually stand for? If something stays the same, it is constant. There you go. So you often see C as constant, right? We don't usually use I because it's reserved for a special case, which you haven't seen yet. We also don't usually use M. Why not? It's great, usually reserved for gradient. Yeah. You still can use them, but why would you want to do that and then get confused all the time, right? So remember that. Now, good. Now, we can do just as much, we can still do all of the basic operations using the variables, right? So, let's talk about that. Once you add the variables, we no longer have just numbers. Our building blocks are called what kinds of things? Terms. And all terms have exactly how many parts? 4 parts. Excellent. I'm very pleased. That's good. Right? The first part of every term, does anybody remember?
Is
plus and minus. So it's called a sign. There you go. So remember that you'll still see pluses and minuses, but in algebra, they don't always mean add or subtract. They're the signs, right? Because when you're combining, okay, so for example, when you're combining, if they're both negative, then the answer is still a negative, right? You end up you keep the sign and add the numbers. So you've got to be walking through those, remembering that these things are signs now. What's the second part? Anybody remember? Coefficient. Excellent job. Okay? Coefficient. Now, the coefficient of it is really just a fancy word for a multiplier. And the multiplier in a term is always the number part. Right? Coefficient doesn't mean number. Coefficient means multiplier. But for a term, the multiplier is always the number part. Okay? So remember, it's layers. Okay? Now, these two pieces usually are taken together, and they simply tell you how many of something that you have. 3 cars, right? 3 is the coefficient, tells you how many. All right. Third part, anybody remember? Is the base. Excellent. And for a term, what is the base? What is the base? Is always a what? A variable. Good. Excellent. So you have a base or a variable. Okay. And then finally, the fourth part is the exponent. Wonderful. And remember, most of the time you're not going to see exponents right now at this level of algebra, but you need to be aware that they're going to they come up, and they did. We saw some, right, when we were working with these. And these two pieces also go together, and they literally name the term. Because if you don't have a name of something, then it doesn't make any sense, right? So like cars. We know they're cars because they have a name. We know what that means. Yes?
Did you read the story I had to write for the ice cream on my thing?
I don't know what you're talking about, so we'll talk about it in a minute, though. Okay? Okay, so, all right, so 4 parts: sign, coefficient, base, and exponent. All good? Okay, excellent.
We're all good.
Now, do the operations change in algebra? No, operations are still operations. Now, sign rules will take over, so it may look a little different, right? But you still add, subtract, multiply, and divide. If you can ever show me a place where you can add, subtract, where you do anything other than add, subtract, multiply, and divide, if you're in my class, I will automatically give you an 8 on every test. You never have to take any more tests.
Why?
Because it's impossible.
Right?
You may think you're doing something else, but you're not. So, that should be really good news. Because you know how to add, subtract, and multiply, and divide, right? Okay.
Unless
So,
you're kind of like bad at it.
now that doesn't mean that but you have a calculator then. So that doesn't mean that they don't look a little different. Because remember, if we're going to multiply, say I wanted to take 4 times A, that's a little confusing, isn't it? Why do I not like that?
Excuse me.
Right, so 4xa. That's all right. You can all answer. That's fine. So we don't know whether that x is multiplication or that x is a variable. Good. So many times, instead of writing the x, we'll use the dot to represent the multiplication symbol.
Or you can just put them together.
Exactly. But if you have a number and a letter, we can just stick them side by side. Remember that multiplication is the only operation that requires no symbol at all. And so you need to remember that the other direction. Guys, so if you don't see a symbol, what do you automatically assume it is? Multiplication. Excellent. Okay, guys, that also works with letters. What does AB literally mean?
A times B.
A times B. Good. You'll also see parentheses. If you have 2 parentheses side by side with nothing between them, what operation does that indicate? Multiply.
Multiplication.
And also, then you can also have a number right in front of a parentheses. What is that? What operation does that indicate?
That is coefficient.
It's a coefficient, so a multiplier. Perfect. Okay? Yes. And you'll see why this is really important as we go. It's something that's more important later. But remember, when you're replacing variables, substituting, you always put them in parentheses. And so if you end up with 2 parentheses side by side, that means that you need to multiply them. Okay? And again, some of those you'll see later. All right. How about division? Does division change?
No. Yes.
A little bit. Now, you could still see 4 divided by A. But more often, how would you write 4 divided by A?
Fraction.
As a fraction, 4 over A. The fraction bar is simply a division symbol. It has no other meaning. It means to divide. Now, and sometimes you can do the division. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Sometimes you cannot do the division. So that's where fractions come from. It's just a division problem that you can't do. All right? Okay? Now, sometimes you can't do the division, but you can do something. 3 over 6. We can simplify that. Both of those numbers will divide by what? 3. And 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. 6 divided by 3 gives me 2. So the simplified form of 1/2. Make sure you remember that this is the answer. The first answer is not correct because it's not simplified. It's got to be simplified. Excellent. Okay.
Very
Okay.
smart.
And remember, when you think of add or subtract, remember you have to think of those as signs, not add or subtract. So a plus does not always mean add anymore. Depends on the signs. If you're combining a negative and a positive, you don't add, you subtract. If you're combining 2 negatives, you don't subtract, you add. So you must be careful about your signs. And we're gonna have a review assessment of a review exercise with sign rules as well as we go, because these are kind of things else. So we'll look at that when that's what I said, we're gonna have a review on it because we're gonna do that. All right? Hold on. Now, what do I mean if I say that I have like terms? Okay, but what makes them alike?
That they're alike. They have the same variable.
That's true. They have the same
Variable.
base
Oh.
and one other part.
And variable. Coefficient.
No.
You shut up.
So go back to your terms.
Oh, variable.
But
Exponent.
we've got that.
Good job. I say variable. But it is variable.
I put a square around it. What does it look like? Exponent. There you go. All right. The same base and exponent.
Oh, because base is variable.
The base is a variable in the term, right? Okay? Yes. So the same base and exponent. So are x and 4x like terms?
No.
Yes. The coefficient doesn't have anything to do with it. Okay? Are x and y like terms? No. Are x squared and x like terms?
Yeah. No, it's not because
The exponent is a 2 there and a 1 there.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, the base and the exponent can't have to be the same. So are x to the 4th and 3x to the 4th like terms? Yes, because it's x to the 4th and x to the 4th. Okay? Guys, are 6 and 3 like terms? Sure they are. They're both number terms, right? Don't forget that you can still have number terms. They're just not algebraic. Why do I say they're not algebraic?
Because they don't have a variable.
Because they don't have a variable. Good job. Okay, good, excellent. Very pleased. Okay. All right. So, what I want you to do is go back and look at those assignments that we've had and review some of that material. I might put a diagnostic on there just for that kind of thing, but I don't think I can pull enough problems to do that. But go back and look at some of that. It's your introduction to algebra that you did. You've done that assignment. Does everyone remembers that you can still do everything with Education Perfect, even if it's not assigned, just go to your content library, go to math, and your screen looks a little bit different than mine, then algebra, Algebra skills are what we're doing. And you guys are working at level 5 because this is getting prepared for year 9, and year 9 is level 5. Okay? So here we have the topics. Now, you can, guys, listen, you can also, if you look at level 4, there's an introduction to algebra. That's where the stuff is that we talked about today. Okay?